Hi, Sabrina here, Books at Wernberg. I finished the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins a couple of days ago now. I haven't read this one before, but frankly I wasn't that bothered in reading Snow's story. He is not a nice person. Why would I want to read his story? But actually, I should have read this when it came out, so I'm really glad I have done that. I'm really glad I'm reading it after I've read The Hunger Games, because a lot of what is set up in here does reflect on how Snow behaves towards Katniss and that. And I'm also glad I've read it before Sunrise on the Reaping, which has just come out. I'm currently reading that and oh my god. But it makes sense to read these books with the original trilogy and then go back and read the prequels after that. So read these in publication order, the same way you would watch the Star Wars films. Do that. So the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes follows the events of the 10th Hunger Games, where the Capitol are realising they're losing control of the story, that the games aren't doing what they were supposed to do, people aren't really bothered about them, and so they decide to come up with a way of making the games more engaging. And so this year they've decided that Capitol kids are going to be mentoring the tributes as they come in. We really learn a lot about the early games, the brutality, the fact that there are people who have lived through the war at the Capitol who are still literally seeking their revenge. Snow himself was 8 years old when the war ended, so he's grown up with all these stories about the districts and the bloodthirstiness. He lost his father during one of the battles, so he's quite vengeful. He doesn't think much of the districts and that, because we see a lot of it through his eyes. It's very much his perspective. The districts are described as animals, dirty, you can't trust them, they're barbarians, they're savages, all this language to other the districts, so you don't feel sympathy for the tributes. And he's basically given to mentor the girl tribute from District 12, who turns out to be Lucy Greybeard. And she is unlike anything that they have seen. She's free, she wears colour, she sings, she knows how to put on a performance. She is a performer herself. She comes from a group of people called the Covey, who used to travel between the districts before they were contained into District 12, so she doesn't class herself as a district girl, she's a Covey girl, and she embodies everything that means, the freedom that they had to be themselves, to hold on to who they were, even when they have lost so much. And he's kind of bewitched by her almost. He is obsessive about her. He knows that if he can put on a good show with her, whether she, he thinks she can't win to start off with, but if he puts on a good show, it'll do him good, so he can progress his career. His goal is to become president and restoring the Snow name. And you find out that the Snow family has lost everything during the war because all their money was made in District 13, and of course after 13 was destroyed by the Capitol, which we of course all know is a lie. We see how his obsession with retrieving everything that his family has lost, and he feels it's the district's fault that they are in the situation that they are in, that he has no fine clothes, that his cousin has to scrape together to make his clothes, and it's like, well, this is better than nothing. He is not thankful at all for everything Tigress does for him. Yeah, that Tigress, she is Snow's cousin. She's 3 years older than him and clearly has done stuff to survive. It is implied, and Snow doesn't give a shit what she has done in order to keep him and his grandmother with a roof, with food. He doesn't care that she may have sacrificed everything for their sake. And it's also implied that Lucy Gray has also sacrificed herself in order to protect those that she loves. Both these young women, these girls, have sold themselves. It's very clear that that's what they've had to do in order to survive. And Snow just thinks he's owed everything, and it's like, you haven't sacrificed a thing, mate. You are still walking around as though you're royalty. You think you're better than your neighbour because you didn't resort to cannibalism. Well, how do you know? Because you didn't do the cooking. Tigress did the cooking. She created the meals out of whatever she could. So Snow is not a likeable person. He has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And the fact that all I heard when the film came out was people shipping Snow and saying, oh my god, he's wonderful, he's, so handsome. No, this is not a bad boy, people. Snow is horrible. He is obsessed with Lucy Gray. It's all about how he can control her in order to further his own career, his own betterment. He doesn't give a damn about her feelings or anything. He frankly barely sees her as human. She is a tool for him to use throughout the games. Everything that happens that improves the tribute situation for later games is not down to Snow whatsoever. In fact, Snow makes it 100 times worse. Snow introduces the betting system. Snow is just coming up with idea after idea about how actually we can improve the Hunger Games to make people watch them. Well, let's make them mandatory to watch. Let's give people in the districts and the capital no choice but to watch these games. Let's introduce this betting system so the capital can root for their winner. And you're just sitting there thinking, I mean, literally, this guy, he's horrible. And there's a lot of discussion that he has with Dr. Gall. Oh my gosh, she is so sadistic. She's literally like mad scientist gone completely off the rails. She experiments with animals, with avoxes, in order to come up with these weird, horrific scientific experiments that she can use in future games or that she can implement as a punishment. She's horrible. She's horrible. And yet Snow kind of like, yeah, he's got a bit of healthy awareness around her because of personal reasons, but he almost admires her for her thinking. She challenges him to put into action his thoughts on the Hunger Games. Why do we have the games? What did you like about the war? And his idea that, oh, I like the idea of power and control and being part of something and patriotism. And he just comes out with all this stuff where anybody who didn't look as handsome as he did would be ridiculed or pointed out for how evil. But because he's got his blonde curl hairs and looks pretty, he's a pretty boy to look at, he can get away with saying this stuff. And I really think that's where a lot of readers and fans of the film completely missed the point with Snow. They saw a pretty face and swallowed his bullshit hook, line and sinker without actually engaging for a moment to sit and go, hold on, what is he saying? Is he saying what I think he's saying? And a lot of what happens in Songbirds and Snakes just sets up Snow's actions for the future. The way he clasps around the games, the way the games are elevated into this like magical entertainment thingy, the way that we can engage with the capital people to get them to watch the show, to make money from watching the show, which then we can invest into the capital. I mean, the capital that we have in here has still got piles of rubble around the place, which Snow says is a reminder that the war wasn't that long ago. It's been 10 years. 10 years since the end of the war, and yet there's rubble still on the streets of the capital. People are still starving in the capital, and yet it's 1,000 times worse in the districts. But of course the capital people don't give a shit about that. They're all about, well, what about us? What about us? What about us? And it's like, it takes two sides to have a war. One side is normally the oppressor, and the other side is normally the ones fighting back for freedom. And the fact is that the capital people have been told that the districts did this. It's all the districts' fault. And it's like, you were fighting too. You were killing people left, right. They don't care about any of that. It's all the district's fault. It's easy to blame them. And which is why they're quite happy for these sacrifices of kids that turn up in a cattle train. They're literally talked about as though they're animals. I mean, this year they store them in the monkey house, not the peacekeeper stable. So, hey, some things are improving. But it's the way that they treat the tributes. And yet Snow doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with this, really. It's like, oh, well, they're the district, you know, we can't trust them, they're savages, they're barbarians. And it's like, only because you're treating them like that. And then you've got a classmate, Sejanus, who has come from District 2. His family has money, and so he's been like brought into the capital. And he can clearly say, look, that would be me, because he's a District 2 boy. And he's very much the voice of, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. Not should we? We shouldn't be doing this. He is the voice of humanity, of compassion and that. And Snow is so concerned with his prospects that every time Sejanus says something, he's just like, well, keep your head down, keep quiet. Oh my God, I don't want to be associated with this person. Why does everybody keep linking us together? And it's like, because every time something happens, Snow steps up and kind of like diffuses the situation by twisting whatever is said as a positive into a, well, how can we use this? And here is a young lad who just cannot cope with the fact that He's not accepted in the capital, and he's now no longer accepted in his district home, and yet he is appalled by what he's seeing as the complete barbaric treatment of the district people. And he knows that if it wasn't for his father's money, he'd be in exactly that situation. And then we also see that there are some people in the capital who are not happy about what's going on. The Heavensby family, yeah, that family, certainly has issues with what's going on, and it's really interesting to see how the Heavensby family are like a lot more open about, hold on, that this is wrong, this is not how our society should be, that they are more educated and more compassionate. And it's really interesting to see that even back in the 10th Hunger Games, that family was already ruffling feathers, were already like raising voices saying, no, we're not doing this. It's interesting to see those subtle like moments within the capital citizens that people are not happy about what's going on, and yet they're almost free to say this. So clearly something happens between the 10th and a later game that means the capital changes the way they behave, and that all that dissidence has to go underground more. It's quite telling watching Tigress and the grandmam, Snow's grandmother, how they change their views over the course of the book. Tigress is compassionate. She has a kind heart. She feels sorry for the tributes. She doesn't think it's fair. And she keeps that throughout. It almost becomes more obvious to her that the treating the tributes the way they do is wrong, and she feels for it. Whereas Grandmam thinks they deserve everything, that they're savages and that, until she gets to know Lucy Gray a little bit, and she's like, oh, tell Lucy Gray I'm sorry she's having to sacrifice herself. And it's just like, whoa, that's totally the capital line right there. It's a sacrifice you're making, but I'm sorry you're having to do it. How hypocritical of her. Whereas at least Tigress is like, tell her I'm sorry. It's just straight up, tell her I'm sorry. And it's like Tigress is literally on that boundary between feeling compassion and becoming a rebel. She's literally on that line throughout Songbirds and Snakes. And you wonder what she's seen in order to survive and what she has encountered that makes her still, I mean, she's still compassionate. She hasn't grown a hard heart or anything. She doesn't blame the districts. And it's like, what has she gone through? What has she seen? So there's that. And there's obviously the setup of the games, the fact that after the 10th Hunger Games, the games themselves start changing and evolving to become these forms of entertainment. And it's quite scary seeing how reality TV shows do the same thing in order to keep being aired, that they become more elaborate, more over the top, more show rather than a reality TV show. So clearly there's influence there on the fact that the games have had to adapt in order to continue to fulfill the bloodthirst and the power that they give certain members of the capital. Obviously it's really interesting that Lucy Gray, nobody seems to know who she is in District 12, and you'd have thought, because she's the victor of District 12, you'd have thought she'd be known. And she's not. There's this rumours that somebody won the games from District 12, but nothing's known about her. Yeah, there's a reason why. Between Snow and Gaul, the whole thing is like hushed up. The games are lost because so much of it was such a disappointment. It wasn't under the capital's control what happened, both prior to the games and during the games. So those games are effectively wiped from the collective memory, and any mention of Lucy Gray and her victory is just, no, we're not going to talk about it. There's no repeat of the games, nothing. And this is before the victory tours, so they don't even have that. That came in the following year. We know the 11th Hunger Games was Mag's game that she won, and she was the first tribute to go on the victory tour. What's really interesting about this book is you understand Snow. That's what this book does. You understand, and sometimes I found myself nodding and going, yeah, I get that. And it's like, hold on, no. This is wrong. I should not be agreeing with anything this man says, because he is literally the embodiment of the idea of keeping the district under the thumb through fear and bloodshed. And it just highlights how easy it is for a person to believe what a dictator, what a vile individual can say in such a way that you understand them and you sympathise with them. And we see that today with world leaders who will literally do anything they can with words they will put on a show in order to get the general public to side with them. And that's what Snow tries to do so many times. He tries to get people to side with him. He's trying to get the reader to side with him. And he's not nice. He's a selfish, obsessive, controlling, manipulative so-and-so who will sacrifice anyone for his personal gain. His motto, Snow always lands on top. Oh my god, I'm never going to look at falling snow the same way again, I tell you. We learn more about his father, the fact that his father nicked Sir Dean Highbottom. He's credited with creating the Hunger Games. Yeah, when he was stupid and slightly drunk and came up with this ridiculous concept, and then Snow's dad, Crassius, basically nicks the idea and hands it into Dr. Ghoul as his own piece of work. And he makes it clear, look, hey Dr. Ghoul, you know, Highbottom did this wasn't me. He came up with this idea, I'm handing it in. And Highbottom has been landed as this person who should be lauded and held up as a hero for the idea of a Hunger Games. And Highbottom is absolutely distraught. It's like, no, I never meant for this to be put into place. It was a stupid joke. I mean, again, who jokes about killing children? I mean, I'm sorry, Highbottom, whether you meant it or not, you do not joke about killing children, because that's how these things happen. So even Highbottom in his drunk, you know, he's drugged himself out because he wants nothing to do with this. Even in that drugged out state, you are still responsible. You came up with this idea to murder children as a form of control and punishment. Your hands are not clean. Don't pretend your hands are not clean. So I quite like the fact that Snow does poison him, but it's almost like, no, that's the easy way. You poisoned him because he has made your life miserable. You poisoned him because your father was friends with him and you don't like that, and you poisoned him for your own benefit. And frankly, you put Highbottom out of his misery, because that man should be made to live with the fact that he joked about murdering children as a form of control. And like I say, you've got Dr. Ghoul, who definitely has a bigger hand to play within the capital. I mean, nobody with that amount of sadistic nature should be in charge of anything, and yet she like epitomises the highlight of the capital's way of thinking. Snow spends quite a bit of this book in the District 12. He gets demoted to be a peacekeeper because it's found out he cheated and helped Lucy Grace survive the snake mutt attack. So he's sent off to be a peacekeeper, and it's just like, okay, well fine, what can I do? Oh hey, I can be with Lucy Grace, I can be with my girl and all that. And it doesn't quite go to plan how that happens. He almost ends up getting wrapped up in a rebellion going on in there, but he's always thinking of his own skin, how to get out of the situation, how to improve things, how to make the Snow name better. You know, even in a situation where actually he could live his life, he could be happy as a peacekeeper, he's got to be with the woman he loves, he's out of the capital, it doesn't matter anymore. No, he's still planning and scheming and manipulating in order to make himself always appear better. And it's like, no, you're not nice at all. So that's quite interesting. The ending is quite ambiguous. I have seen clips from the film, so obviously I know the film does things differently. I know that in the film the games end with Lucy Gray singing to the snakes, and that's how she wins because she's the last one standing. Whereas in the book that actually happens and brings down the number of tributes to 5, and then she ends up poisoning some. So she actually wins through a clever distraction and all that, and that doesn't quite happen in the games. I'm gonna watch the film to see what happens, because I've not seen the film either, but I will be watching that at some point. We never really get to know Lucy Gray, because obviously Snow doesn't really know Lucy Gray. He thinks he knows her, he has this image of her, but it's like, she's a performer, she knows the Hunger Games is a show, she is playing for the camera, she is playing for Snow because she wants to live. It's as simple as that. Like everybody else in that arena, she wants to live, so she's playing the game. So we as a reader don't actually know much about Lucy Gray at all, other than that she shows Snow, other than what she wants Snow to see. And so if she's going to play that, oh I love you so much, you don't know if any of that's real or not. Snow thinks it is. Snow is sucked in by her hook, line and sinker. But I really think Lucy Gray understood Snow a hell of a lot more than he understood himself. She knew what he was like, and I think her playing for him, playing that role that she knew would mean he would look after her and he would get her out of the games, she knew how to do that. She knew how to manipulate his heart completely and utterly, and kudos to her. Anyone else would have done the same. And it's interesting, she manipulates Snow, her mentor, in order to survive the games. Katniss is forced to manipulate the Capitol in order to save Peter's life. That's that parallel already there, and the fact that Snow now doesn't trust love because of what Lucy Gray does, and therefore he does not trust Katniss's love that is portrayed to him. He knows that tributes can act in order to save themselves because he's been on the receiving end of it. So there are a lot of parallels between what happens in Songbirds and Snakes and what happens in the Hunger Games and that, and the way that Snow behaves with Lucy Gray. Very, very similar vibes in the way he treats Katniss, particularly in the later books and everything. I want to mention Reaper Ash, who is an extremely powerful character in this book. He's a tribute from District 11. Oh, there we are, there's the list. Yeah, District 11, Reaper Ash. He is a very large lad, very strong, very powerful, and Lucy Gray tells us that he has already apologised to all the other tributes, saying, I will kill you, but I will do it with mercy, and I will make sure the Capitol is held accountable. And you see him throughout the course of the games. Every time a tribute dies, he will collect up the body, and he lies them all out side by side, and he brings down the Panem flag that's hanging in the arena this year. They've decorated the arena this year, and he covers the bodies with the flag, which Coriolanus is just like, wow, what are you doing? But Reaper is making a point. He believes he's going to be victor because he is the strongest out there, and he's probably one of the smartest out there. The career tributes are not that smart. They might have the muscle, but there's no brains on up there. And at this point, we don't actually really have proper career tributes. They're just better fed more than anything else. And then, so Reaper's doing this, covering their bodies with the flag, is literally an act of defiance. And it's like, these bodies literally lie at your door. This is your doing. And during the games, he won't take any food from his mentor. She's managed to shower him with gifts. He won't take the food, he won't take the water. So he's slowly dehydrating. And then when they get a rain shower, there's a puddle that appears in the games, and he drinks only from that. And Lucy Gray figures this out and drops in some poison, some rat poison that she's got from when they were in the monkey house. And he ends up drinking that. And it's almost a kindness, because it's Snow and the other mentors start to realise that actually Reaper is not well, that he's already like coming down with something. I can't remember what they say, because one of the tributes has been bitten by a rat and goes mad with rabies, and there's like rumours that actually maybe Reaper has got rabies developing, and so Lucy Gray, by poisoning his water source, has actually done him a mercy. But it's really interesting, and when he realises he's dying, he goes to lie down in the line, and it just manages to drag the flag over his body before he dies, as if to say, yeah, you killed me too. But he's very powerful. Obviously, he doesn't interact much with Snow, so Snow doesn't have to deal much with him. But what you see speaks volumes. What Reaper shows, the fact he does not care at all for how the Capitol think of him or anything. It's like, screw you. I'm not going to let you walk away without feeling uncomfortable about this. There are a lot of songs in Songbirds and Snakes. As I say, Lucy Gray is part of the Covey, who sing. They sing for their supper, as she says. So we hear a lot of songs that we know. So we've got the Meadow song that obviously we heard with Katniss for the first time when she sang it to Rue. There's the Hanging Tree that we hear later on in the Mockingjay. But there are a lot. We've got the Ballad of Lucy Gray. There's so many songs. There's songs that, like My Darling Clementine, that are like these traditional folk songs that the Coveys still know and they perform. And it's really interesting that after this, songs are kind of like almost banned from District 12. I am reading Sunrise of the Reaping, and there are references to song, but there are songs that are banned, and that is a direct action of what Snow has done, because he knows knowledge is dangerous, and a little knowledge he understands is really dangerous. So he wants to make sure that people don't know. People do not remember Lucy Gray, that he doesn't want people to realise actually songs can be used to spread messages, to teach you things. So he kind of puts down songs, and the only song that really you're supposed to know is the Gem of Panem that his grandmam still sings. So yeah, Songbirds and Snakes is certainly an interesting book because it's not a traditional Hunger Games book in any stretch of the imagination, because we are so in the Capitol's head by being in Snow's head. We learn an awful lot about how things are justified, how occupation is justified, and it should make people angry, it should make people cross, that it's really easy to manipulate people into believing something in order to keep control, and that's effectively what this book is about. The capital are losing control over the districts, they're losing control over the capital themselves, and therefore they need to remind people consistently, look, there was a terrible war, it was the district's fault, they rebelled against us even though we did everything for them. No, they didn't. We all know that the districts looked after the capital. We all know the districts do not need the capital in order to survive. And yet it's a lie that is perpetuated and built upon during these games, and certainly from Snow, about how do we keep control through fear? How do we make people fear? By taking away rights, by othering people. Sounding familiar yet? So this is the longest Hunger Games book actually out so far. It's over 500 pages, but I think because it's not just talking about the games themselves, it is talking about the setup of the capital, but also the setup of District 12 and the way that Snow navigates himself through this story in order to come out on the other side as someone who's like, I've now got a firm path. I know what I'm going to do in order to rise to the position of president that I am owed. This is what I'm owed. I mean, he's so got that in his head. Really ironic though. I started reading this. It's got 4 quotes at the front, which are fascinating quotes. But the first line, Coriolanus released the fistful of cabbage into the pot of boiling water and swore that one day it would never pass his lips again. What's he eating? Boiled cabbage. Snow is eating district food right at the start of this, and he has promised himself he'll never do it again. And it's like, Snow could have been a sympathiser if he had just stopped for 5 minutes and thought about, hey up, I have more in common with the districts than I do with the capital. I have fallen just as far, my family is nothing. But because he'd rather hang on to where he came from, all those stories of the Snow family, he wants that at the cost of compassion with others less fortunate. I think my favourite quote, there are 5 quotes in this book, because Susanna Collins really wants to hammer it home because people are stupid. So she is literally pulling out quotes to get the reader to understand exactly what she's talking about. And the ones in the beginning, Sunrise and the Reaping, when I get to that, are really hard hitting. But I think my favourite is, man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. So this is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, The Social Contract, 1762. Just think about that. Man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. Songbirds and Snakes did not make me cry anywhere near as much as the other books are absolutely destroying me. It certainly made me stop and think. And I was reading out a lot of this again to my husband. A lot of things I was pulling out and going, oh my God, Robert, this, and this. And the whole concepts and ideas of how a few people keep control, how a few can govern what everybody else has to do, and the othering of a group of people in order to rise yourself up keeps coming out time and time again throughout this book. And seeing Snow justify everything the capital does time and time again, even though he's on the front line in District 12, even though he's right there at the front witnessing what's going on with the tributes and the Hunger Games, he justifies everything that they go through and that he sees as this is right, this is what we need, this is what the capital has to do in order to maintain order. And I think the final thing that really, really hooks it in is this hatred and the Mockingjays. He hates the Mockingjays. The Jabberjays he admires because they were created by the capital to be this perfect tool that obviously was twisted by the rebels when they figured out what they were. And so the Jabberjays were released, and the ones that were in the wild were believed to die out by the first winter because engineered animals cannot generally survive outside the lab. And that was the reasoning. And the fact is the Jabberjays did survive, and they mated with the mockingbirds. that were there, and created this new species called the mockingjay, which obviously we know quite distinctly. And he thinks that's abhorrent, that we have nature causing chaos amongst the order of the capital, that the jabberjays, they are naturally dying out anyway, but because of the way nature is, that nature survives, they have created this new species. And it's really interesting seeing his visual reaction to the mockingjays. He despises them, and clearly he sees their survival as linked to the survival of the districts. The districts still survive. They still insist on living their lives. They will hold on to who they are as much as they can, despite everything the capital throws at them. And I think for Snow, his connection between the capital and the jabberjays and the districts and the mockingjays, that's where it's so strong in his head. And his violent reaction towards the mockingjays, because he deems them unnatural, they are chaotic. It's how he thinks of the districts. They're chaotic. It's unnatural. He wants that order and control that the capital presents, that the jabberjays represent, and that's really interesting. And him going out and taking pleasure in shooting the mockingjays is, yeah. If you still like Snow at that point, you missed the point. So Songbirds and Snakes is well worth reading. Like I say, read it after you read the original Hunger Games, because it is really important to literally understand how easy it is for a country to slide into this organised dictatorship at the cost of one group's freedom, in this case the district's people's freedom. It's easy to do. The fact that the Western world is already taking steps in order to control the mass population. It's already happening, and Suzanne Collins clearly saw that and said, hey, here's my warning. Don't do it. Don't let it happen to you. Don't believe the propaganda and the lies that you are told. Go and think for yourself. Be educated. Read books. And so Songbirds and Snakes, I think, really is her two fingers up to particularly the American government at the moment, who are banning books left, right and centre because they will not toe the line that they want to be sold for whatever reason that they randomly want to pick. The fact that the Hunger Games is on that banned book list in so many states is a terrifying concept, because these books are a warning. Don't fall for it. Don't let people take away your freedoms in the name of being safe. So, highly enjoy Songbirds and Snakes. It's definitely a solid 4.75 for me. I really enjoyed it. It's extremely well written, and as I say, it really adds to the lore of the Hunger Games. If I didn't know better, I said when Suzanne Collins gave her draft of the Hunger Games to her husband, who asked her all these questions, she wrote everything down, and she had a plan, and she knew the lore of this world right back then, and she kept it in a folder, because so many things tie together. So many things make sense, and too often you see prequels that kind of tread on the toes of the later books. These don't do that. It's the same with the Star Wars film. George Lucas had an overarching plan. He made 3 films that were in the middle of those 3 trilogies first, and then he did the prequels. So stuff that happens in the prequels doesn't step on the toes of those first films that were made, and any things that do is because they were changed later on. So I really think Suzanne Collins actually had a lot of this planned out, and she never meant to write it until she felt, hold on, I need to write this book. She has said she will only write a book if she has something to say. Boy, does she have something to say. There we go. Yeah, so please don't dismiss Songbirds and Snakes like I originally did just because it's Snow. Go and read it, please. And certainly read it in the right place with the other ones. Leave your thoughts down below. Have you read Songbirds and Snakes? If not, why not? Was it like me? Your favourite bits, please. Just leave it all down below. That'd be great. As always, thank you very much for watching, and happy reading. Bye.